As a result, registering his name on the deep web occasionally occurs when clients are delighted with his work. Lennox then asks about bartender Jordan, to which she informs him that he leaves every other week, and she thinks he's helping out at his old job. She presents Van with a cocktail, but Dylan appears out of the blue and swiftly consumes it, asking what kind of cocktail this is. Jenny smacks his head, stating that it's adios, prompting him to wonder why she did that. She yells how Dylan can sit there drinking casually after screwing up that badly on a job, to which Dylan reasons that it's their fault for slapping those ridiculous conditions on it and that he couldn't do anything alone. Meanwhile, Lennox contemplates the implications of his identity being registered on the deep web. Jenny reassures him, explaining that there's no immediate risk, emphasizing that his reputation as a successful contractor will be recognized across the network, and he can name the rewards he wants for a quest. She explains that it usually takes at least 10 months to get his name on the deep web, but it seems like his clients request it first. Jenny mentions that customers who don't have a connection to her don't have a means of contacting him, so she assumes they are getting anxious. Lennox expresses his concerns that having an identity on the deep web doesn't sound all that great. In response, Jenny assures him not to fret about leaking his information because they use a back door connected to the city government's main integrated network window. Hence, the security is perfect, and Dylan concurs that she is right. Lennox anxiously wonders what that means, and she responds that it wouldn't be possible without the city government's cooperation. Lennox concurs, contemplating that's the reason this street, which is full of violence day in and day out, goes unchecked by the police and the city government's agents. He surmises it would be more surprising if he learned that the higher-ups weren't involved. Jenny then asks if there is some request he would like to make when he receives quests. Lennox discloses his preference for rare forms of inherent magic, such as abilities related to time, space, or potent regenerative capabilities. He also expresses interest in acquiring a relic or a precious miracle drug with a similar rarity and worth as magic of that caliber. Jenny questions Lennox's certainty about his preferences, highlighting the difficulty of quests that offer such rare and challenging rewards even for someone as capable as him. Dylan interrupts, stating that it's none of Jenny's business, emphasizing that she asked him what Van wanted, and he responded accordingly. He asserts that Van would have already considered any considerations regarding the difficulty of the requests. Jenny concedes to Dylan's point, acknowledging that she has crossed the line and apologizes to the protagonist. Lennox clarifies that he doesn't mean he will take only those quests and emphasizes that he wants to explain that that's what he wants. Jenny gets his stance and assures him that she will put in a request to edit his information. She mentions that edit requests are a slow process, so it'll take about a week. She recommends that he refrain from taking on any quests until the editing process is completed. When the protagonist anxiously ponders the reason, she informs him that there's a substantial difference in his perceived value before and after officially registering. Once his registration is complete, there will be a significant devaluation, causing him to suffer a loss of at least 10 million in worth. Lennox lets out a heavy sigh, realizing he needs approximately 20 million more to afford Stimonia. Dylan notices his concern and asks if he needs money. Upon Lennox's affirmation, Dylan informs him that these days there is a job that mercenaries take on to earn some cash on the side, and Lennox can bag more than $1 million a day if he's good enough. Intrigued, Lennox expresses interest and asks Dylan to provide more details about this opportunity. The next day, Lennox arrives at 50th District, the City Government Environment Agency's District Management Headquarters' 5th Observation Post. The place is bustling with numerous mercenaries. The registrar at the location assigns him the number 484 and instructs him to focus on the screen, informing him that they're sending people inside in groups of 4. Lennox observes that the registrar avoids eye contact and wonders why he is grouped in 4s. Despite this, he contemplates his inclination towards working independently rather than being part of a group. He reminisces that Dylan informed him there are undeveloped districts outside the 50th district, and apparently many vagrants are dying out there because of the contamination. Then, beasts gather around the dead bodies and also get contaminated. That's why the city government decided something needed to be done, so the city authorities have offered rewards amounting to 1 billion for each of these contaminated beasts slain, which implies that by eliminating 10 of these creatures, Lennox could potentially earn 10 million. Lennox reflects on his need to accumulate more than 20 million sel, and amid this, 3 mercenaries approach him. One of them greets the protagonist, asking if he is 484, and introduces himself as number 482, named Miguel. Lennox realizes he is on a team with them, so he agrees that he is 484 and introduces himself as Van. Miguel then introduces the rest of the 2 as Erickson and Claria and asks if they should get going, and they agree to proceed. As they move, Lennox contemplates that these 3 people already know each other and assess their magical abilities. He discerns that they only possess sufficient mana to enhance the strength of their bodies and hopes they won't get in his way. As all the mercenaries make their way toward the undeveloped district, Miguel casually asks Lennox if he finds it fortunate that they aren't far from their destination. Lennox, displaying a lack of enthusiasm, reluctantly agrees. Undeveloped district includes the district in the upper 50s and the districts whose numbers haven't even been decided yet. It's a large area composed of ruins, and in the past, because of the fast expansion of the Balkan, the city government made an ambitious plan to expand the residential area. However, after failing to manage the districts in the 40s, the districts in the 50s were essentially abandoned. Claria remarks that it must be hard for anyone who works outside of Balkan, mentioning that they do say that the contamination trouble only worsened recently. However, now they have to go back and forth to the city with those dangers nearby. Erickson chimes in, considering they feel sketchy when looking at the factories and buildings built outside the city. Meanwhile, deep down, Lennox agrees and reflects on his experience working in the factory, contemplating that the factory made the corpse pulverizer of the mages to sell. Conversely, Miguel considers that to mercenaries like them, it's not necessarily just a lousy thing that undeveloped districts exist. According to him, it's not easy to come by quests where one can earn 1 million sel just for hunting one of the contaminated. Erickson mentions the usefulness of his shotgun, particularly against larger adversaries. Meanwhile, Claria turns toward Lennox, noticing his sole possession, a revolver, and remarks that it seems to be his only equipment. She asks him if he utilizes other gear or weaponry during their missions. Lennox realizes that's what they have been wondering and considers that he has no reason to hide, so he informs them that he studies lightning-type magic. Miguel anxiously asks if he means pure elemental stuff, and when the protagonist concurs, stating that they could say that, it takes them aback. With a sigh, Miguel remarks that they are mistaken, prompting Lennox to wonder in what sense. Miguel explains that they assumed he was a mage who learned a more common type of magic, mentioning that mages who work alone usually work on skills compatible with all kinds of teammates. Meanwhile, Lennox deeps down, considers it a stupid excuse, and contemplates that he did hear that pure elemental mages are unwelcomed when they are beginners because they could harm the team's efficiency. However, he finds it strange for them to exclude him so obviously and wonders if they were planning this from the start. With that in mind, Miguel asserts that they need to rethink working together as they would prefer to work with someone who can support them. Lennox then counter-questioned if Miguel was required to be in a 4-person group to get a reward for this raid, to which Miguel remarked that he didn't think so, stating that some people might still get injured or die. Because of this exchange, Lennox concludes their partnership, knowing that trying to collaborate when their objectives differ will only result in stress. He firmly asserts that they should separate at this point, as working together doesn't seem feasible when their goals are not aligned. As the protagonist turns around to leave, Miguel asks if he is sure that will be okay. Lennox gazes at their relieved expressions, so he responds to his query that it would have been much nicer if Miguel had asked him earlier and acknowledges that he may have made things complicated. When Miguel dismisses his assertion, stating that he couldn't be so blunt, Lennox retorts that they will separate here and suggests they must put some distance between them to pursue their hunting endeavors. Claria sarcastically appreciates his decision, while Miguel mockingly believes that Van must have a plan. As the protagonist departs, he feels annoyed by the situation, realizing that it would have been foolish to fight to prove his strength, and in the end, he would be the one losing out if he worked with a team. On the other hand, Claria ponders why Miguel is staring at Van, emphasizing that they got rid of a hindrance, as having a parasite like that in the group is annoying. Erickson concurs, emphasizing that it's already irritating just thinking about joining the mercenary community raiding team. They don't have the time to worry about a weakling like Van. Furthermore, he assumes that Van will probably crawl back to the city once he figures out how hard this job is. Meanwhile, Miguel contemplates that this is what they wanted, but wonders why he feels unsettled. As if Van chose to get away from them so quickly because his magic skills are superior, they might have lost a precious connection. Conversely, Lennox assassinates a beast with his lightning bolt magic and remarks that it looks more disgusting in real life. According to Dylan, the contamination first appeared about 3 years ago, as a large-scale poisonous living weapons project carried out in the undeveloped districts called Black Consumer, which is said to be the cause. This project aimed to control viruses with strong proliferative power to increase cell regeneration explosively. It was meant to test the possibility of immortality, but ended up birthing contamination instead. Furthermore, it's said that if one is infected, all the cells in his body will replicate exponentially, and that individual will explode. However, the biggest problem is that the corpse leaks a black fog, a remnant of the experiment's failed technique, and this black fog floats around looking for living beings to inhabit. Lennox exhales a sigh and grasps his knife, considering that he doesn't want to, but they said to bring its eyes as proof of having killed it. As he prepares to take them out, his attention is diverted to the horde of beasts, but he remains unfazed to confront them and refers to them as dogs. He was already tracking the contaminated through mana detection, so he was prepared to greet them. He swiftly unleashes the gravity bind maneuver, which binds one of the beasts, while the other attempts to attack Lennox, but it proves futile as he has already prepared a magic shield around himself to prevent himself from any precarious situation. He then uses his mana-imbued bullet, and with the help of other magical maneuvers, he overpowers 5 beasts. Through his adept use of magic, Lennox successfully neutralizes the threats posed by these creatures. However, he finds collecting their eyes annoying. He gathers them in an etuis and contemplates that they said it's 1,000,000 cell each, so he has gotten 5,000,000 now. He considers it not a wrong way to earn money. However, it's not something he wants to do long term. Without this detection magic and a 2-kilometer radius, seeking out the contamination would have been annoying. According to him, contaminated are not as weak as he thought, and their movements appeared straightforward. These creatures possessed an unexpected combination of swiftness and formidable strength. He realizes that the reason mercenaries were grouped in 4 might be due to the overwhelming nature of the task. Lennox assumes that facing these creatures alone would have been too challenging for individuals like Miguel or Erickson. Pondering this, he takes a deep breath, contemplating the situation while holding his viper close. Reflecting further, Lennox questions whether his companions were cognizant of this fact. If they were, it would imply they intentionally abandoned him to face potential danger alone, possibly assuming he was a feeble mage. He entertains the possibility that their departure wasn't entirely improbable, leaving him to confront perilous situations despite their beliefs about his strength as a mage. After a small break, he resumes his quest, searching for the next target. His goal for this job was to earn at least 20,000,000 cell, the amount he needed to buy the Stimonia from Starnia Pharma Co. As he roams around in search of more contaminated beasts, Lennox realizes the necessity to eliminate more of them to reach his financial goal. He estimates the current pace and speculates that achieving this target might take approximately 2 days. Reflecting on his choices, he realizes it would have been wiser to take on a quest that offered an upfront payment. However, he sighs deeply, acknowledging that dwelling on such regrets serves no purpose at this stage. Sensing the looming presence of contaminated creatures nearby, Lennox swiftly pivots, activating his mana manipulation abilities. Using his magical prowess, he detects the presence of 3 contaminated entities confined within cage-like metal boxes, discerning their locations through his supernatural senses. Recognizing the situation, Lennox concentrates his mana, realizing he possesses the ideal magical spell for dealing with this abandoned building. Drawing upon his knowledge of summoning-type magic theory, he employs a maneuver known as lightning tracker magic. Although he can't grant the magical foxes their own will, this spell boasts a remarkable duration and proves suitable for the current scenario. While the magical foxes lunge toward their target, Lennox senses someone's presence, which bewilders him because until now, he hasn't felt any presence, just like his first encounter. He notices a person hastily running and wonders if this individual is the same sniper from that previous encounter. He plans to halt that person with a sound wave maneuver, but to his surprise, his magic doesn't affect that blue-haired girl, and she keeps running. Lennox remarks that she is good enough that sound waves won't work on her, so he unleashes an ice burn maneuver to halt her. The girl barely manages to evade it, and the ice arrow causes a fiery explosion as it hits the ground. She can't believe that she is alive. However, her sense of relief is short-lived because suddenly, the ice bursts again and grapples her legs, rendering her unable to move. Lennox steps towards her, acknowledging that she's pretty skilled, so he decides he won't let her have any rest. When the girl discreetly tries to grasp her gun, Lennox swiftly employs Gravity Bind, which shackles her hand, prompting her to yell in frustration. He wonders if she is screaming and cussing from the first meeting, and then tosses her gun aside by utilizing his magic. She pleads for leniency, but Lennox, inhaling Viper, questions why he should relent. Perplexed, the girl questions what she did to deserve this treatment, and the protagonist counters, citing her attempt to flee when he discovers her hiding. In defense, she explains that she merely aimed not to disturb and emphasizes her intent not to interfere with his hunting pursuits. When the main character sarcastically dismisses her statement as convincing, she asserts her belief that he doesn't trust her. However, she appeals to him, asking if he could at least remove the ice underneath her, as she's feeling like her toes are on the verge of freezing off. Lennox doesn't think that she will resist, but can't comprehend what she is thinking, so he brandishes his gun at her. In a state of panic, she abruptly calls out Dylan, which startles Lennox. She reveals that she works with Dylan and states that she is just a regular mercenary. Surprised by her revelation, the protagonist surmises that she must have connections to Antares if she's associated with Dylan. He inquires how she knew about his acquaintance with Dylan, wondering if Dylan mentioned him. As she confirms his suspicions, Lennox becomes curious about her motives for following him and asks how she escaped his mana detection skill. She assures him that she had no intentions of causing harm. She had been in close proximity and wanted to avoid getting entangled in anything. Her decision to hide stemmed from that desire to remain uninvolved. Emphasizing her point, she notes that she would have attacked him if she wanted to. Regarding her evasion of his mana detection, she cryptically remarks that attributing it to the power of money might be the most straightforward explanation she can offer. When the protagonist wonders what she means, she shows him the charm on her waist. She explains that it's an assimilation charm made by an advanced druid and it's expensive, but it's worth it. Lennox abruptly snatches that charm while she yells at him to return it. Druid nature-type techniques don't have an energy form that can be called their power. Their power comes from the firm faith nature's creatures have in them. Therefore, their powers leave no trace or sign of their presence. Lennox acknowledges the logic behind this, understanding that such power would be imperceptible to him. He notices the fading pattern and realizes that his own presence is becoming fainter too. He speculates that this ability functions only when someone remains in one spot. Considering how the symbol grew fainter, it must have limited uses, and he doesn't think she would have attacked him with a crude item like this. Amidst it all, the girl nervously smiles and asks Lennox if he plans on returning the charm to her, highlighting its exorbitant value. Lennox gazes at the charm and admits he can't promise its return. However, he consoles her, saying not to fret, affirming his intention to make good use of it and eventually return it to Dylan. In frustration, she exclaims that Dylan, despite having it, doesn't even know what's within his wallet. Finally, after some reluctance, she reluctantly agrees, acknowledging that it might be simpler to let it go. However, despite this, she becomes excited to see that the ice melted, and now she can move her feet. Yet, she expresses displeasure at the water seeping into her boots and questions what Lennox intends to do about it. In response, Lennox asks if that's what is essential right now. With her hands restrained by the gravity bind, she pressed, asking what came next, reiterating that she had already assured him she had no hostile intentions toward him. Meanwhile, Lennox contacts Jenny, asking if there is a blue-haired mercenary woman in Antares, and Jenny concurs. However, their conversation is abruptly cut short due to the terrible signal, likely because Lennox is on the outskirts. Despite the interrupted call, he reflects that he checked what needed to be checked and diminishes his gravity bind maneuver, rendering her hands free from the effect. He then inquires about her name. She introduces herself as Camilla, adding that he can call her Milla. She then asks if he is Van, asserting she has heard plenty about him. Retrieving her gun from the mud, she questions if he came to eliminate the contamination. Lennox counters by asking if she isn't here to do the same thing, and Milla agrees, revealing that she has needed some quick cash lately. She adds that the boss was saying something about the deep web and how they can't take quests for a bit, so she came here instead. When the protagonist doesn't respond, she anxiously asks what's up and if something is wrong, but Lennox denies her assertion. She tells him there is a way to kill a bunch of the contaminated at once, seeking his help, and asks whether he is interested. She proposes splitting the money 50-50 and asks what he thinks. Instead of agreeing to an equal split, Lennox offers her a 7-3 division, which infuriates her, and she anxiously asks what she should live off. Lennox responds that it sounds like he would be killing the contaminated in the end, adding that he has more things to do, so it's a given that he would take a larger share. This response intensifies her frustration, and she sternly questions the fairness of the situation, highlighting that the idea was hers and urges the importance of upholding business ethics. She suggests a 6-4 split by proposing a compromise, expressing her inability to compromise further, deeming it a fair arrangement. Lennox comments that he's uncertain about the idea's brilliance. Nonetheless, he agrees to the 6-4 split, which startles Milla, and she anxiously urges that he can't change his mind later on. Enthusiastically, she turns around, urging him to get moving. When Lennox questions if they'll have to walk, she dismisses the notion. Excitedly, she reveals that she had retrieved something earlier, claiming that she will give him a nice ride. Later, they ride on the forklift truck, and as she drives, Lennox sarcastically remarks that it goes better than it looks. She revealed that she had just retouched some of the wires, and it started working again. Suddenly, Lennox's attention is diverted to a contaminant, and he abruptly attacks it with his magical fox, which pursues the contaminated creature and overpowers it. The protagonist then collects that creature's eyes, and as he rides the vehicle, he inquires where to go next. Miller responds that he wouldn't know, but the contaminated usually search for signs of life to chase after. To her surprise, Lennox already knows that it's the place where vagrants live. When Milla ponders if he already knows, Lennox clarifies that he just assumed, and then contemplates that it's not like he hasn't thought of the possibility of vagrants living out here, except looking for them is almost a waste of time. He asks if she hasn't considered that other mercenaries might have the same plan, as everyone's probably around that area. He then moves to disembark from the vehicle, stating that if Milla doesn't have an alternative plan, she should drop him there. She anxiously halts him, assuring him that she is aware of that, and reveals that she kept a secret that no one knows about. She says that her boss, Antares, has much interest in the vagrants, so she has to volunteer sometimes because of her boss. According to her, they helped the vagrants move and are the only ones who know their current location. Lennox considers the possibility that if her words are valid, they won't encounter any other mercenaries, which he deems as not necessarily a bad outcome. Upon reaching the location, Milla adds that the contaminated creatures likely haven't found this place yet, as the vagrants must be caring for the ones that come near. When the protagonist asks if she hasn't gone inside the building, she remarks that if it weren't for his boss, she wouldn't even go near them and instead go around with scavengers. She halts the vehicle there, stating that they should wait here for a bit, adding that they don't see any contaminated right now, but she is sure they will come here drooling. However, her attention is diverted to a bunch of people arriving at their location. She remarks that there seem to be more than 10, but they are too far. Lennox informs her that they are 18 in total and they are all mercenaries. Milla then expresses her disdain that she came here because she didn't want to come across any of them, while the protagonist responds that if they know how to handle mana, they probably had an easy time finding this place. As he consumes his viper and exudes mana, she asks if he is going to fight them and asserts that they came here first, so they can probably tell those mercenaries to screw off. Lennox responds that it would be nice if they just listened, revealing that he knows some of them. She finds it nice as they can tell them to go away nicely, but the protagonist denies it, stating that he doesn't know them well. The mercenaries approach them, and the protagonist's former team members are shocked to see him there. Miguel comments that they've re-encountered each other, noting that this place seems smaller than he had imagined, and in response, Lennox concurs. Miguel then asks Lennox if the person next to him is someone he has been with all this time, and Lennox responds that he met her on the way. Miguel sarcastically remarks that it's good as it's dangerous to go around alone. When the protagonist asks what he is trying to say, Miguel explains that they had their eyes on this place first and feigns to be friendly, suggesting they could relocate elsewhere if it's okay with Lennox. However, Milla intervenes and firmly questions if Miguel is out of his mind. She asks what kind of bullshit he is spouting, urging how can this place be his to take when no one owns this land. Miguel starts to explain that when a mercenary claims a spot first, but before he finishes, Milla angrily interrupts, shouting at Miguel whether this is his place, emphasizing that she was the one who assisted the vagrants in relocating here initially. When Lennox attempts to calm her down, she urges him not to stop her and brandishes her gun at Miguel. She frustratedly urges Lennox how she cannot be pissed when the bastards that got here after them are telling them to leave. Miguel sternly remarks that she should calm down as they can choose the violent route too. He calculates that there are only 2 of them, while nearly 20 mercenaries are on his side, so if a fight begins, they have the advantage. Meanwhile, Lennox wonders if that guy believes in the strength of numbers. He uses his magic to assess the mercenaries' mana, thinking if they fight, the first one he would need to take down would be that blonde hair guy, as he doesn't feel a presence or any mana from him and wonders if he is so skilled that he can hide them all. Conversely, that blonde-haired guy named Mayorin steps ahead and suggests Miguel should stop right there. Mayorin realizes that Millen is from Antares and remarks that he never expected to see an Antares mercenary here, expressing her pleasure to meet her. He introduces himself, revealing that he is Mayorin from Platon and is guiding these mercenaries today. Miller realizes Platon is another mercenary office as it works alongside Antares in this field. They are said to scout talented mercenaries using their incredible wealth, although she doesn't know where they get their money from. Mayorin then states that everyone knows Antares is interested in the undeveloped districts, and he assumes the residential area here is also Antares' doing. He adds that it would be rude to ask her to leave this place when she is from Antares. He humbly asks whether she at least permits them to rest a bit. When she anxiously asks for rest, Mayorin concurs, adding that if they come across some of the contaminated creatures, they can get rid of them. Lennox realizes he is telling them he won't leave and contemplates that if they react aggressively to this, it will lead to a fight. Sensing Milla's reluctance to confront Platon mercenaries, he ends their deal, prompting her to wonder why this sudden turn of events occurred. She halts him from taking such a step, emphasizing that he should keep to his words, to which he ponders if she wants him to compete with those guys, and says that going around alone would be much easier than that. Milla offers him the charm she purchased for 10 million cells to persuade him to stay, proposing it as an incentive if he cooperates with her. Amidst the conversation, everyone's attention is diverted to the horde of contaminated creatures rushing towards them and catching Miguel and his comrades off guard. Milla turns to Lennox anxiously, asking if he is still leaving after watching all that. She implores him to try this out together as he doesn't have anything to lose and ensures him that they can outmaneuver those adversaries while they are at it too. As Lennox observes the situation, he senses something amiss and contemplates that if there are a bunch of living beings here for so many contaminated to appear all at once. As he gazes at Mayoran's malicious grin, Lennox realizes his decisive plan, suspecting that they are somehow involved, as the situation doesn't seem like a coincidence as it seems more intentional. Realizing the imminent danger, Lennox then advises Milla to take her shotgun and run to the front immediately, assuring her that he will take care of the rest. Milla gets his plan and abruptly sprints to heed Van's advice. She catches the attention of other mercenaries, prompting them to wonder about her motive, and Miguel and Claria command the rest of the mercenaries to chase her. Before they can proceed, Lennox swiftly unleashes his sinkhole maneuver, a magic spell used to create a small hole, and expands it by channeling more mana. As a result, a hole emerges beneath the mercenaries, causing them to fall into it. The protagonist wishes they would stay down there, but he acknowledges that won't happen. Suddenly, he becomes surprised to see Mayoran's body exuding mana and realizes he is hiding it. He then grins and unleashes a maneuver that interferes with the opponent's mana flow. That instant they use mana and break it. Meanwhile, Mayoran kneels in excruciating pain as his mana won't move. His body starts trembling, realizing it's like someone's forcibly controlling it, and he soon realizes it's Mage Van's doing. Feeling more confident in the success of his maneuver, the protagonist notes Mayoran's considerable power and assumes that if it works on him, it might affect others too. Consequently, he employs the maneuver on the other mercenaries, leaving them bewildered and unable to move their mana. Miguel can't fathom how it happens and tells Lennox they can't get up there, requesting him to help them as they can't move their mana. When the protagonist doesn't respond, Morin sternly calls out Miguel, asking if he still doesn't get it, and he becomes startled upon realizing that Lennox is responsible for their predicament. The protagonist then unleashes his magic fox maneuver, which startles everyone and prompts them to wonder what this is. The magical foxes summoned by this maneuver assist Milla by impeding the progress of the contaminated creatures, and she realizes these foxes are Van's. She attempts to shoot one of the creatures, but unfortunately hits its eyes, which were crucial for their payment. However, in the heat of the moment and excitement, she fails to realize the significance of her shot and finds it impressive. Meanwhile, feeling frustrated, Lennox pats his head in dismay, knowing she wasn't supposed to shoot out their eyes. At that moment, she sadly acknowledges her blunder. However, instead of letting her blunder overwhelm her, she resolves to stay determined. Refocusing her aim, she confidently sets her sights on the creatures' bodies this time, determined to shoot accurately. On the other hand, Morin manages to get out of the pit. He briefly gazes at Lennox, and without uttering a word, he sprints to confront the contaminated creature. Morin's nonchalant response prompts the protagonist to wonder if he is leaving without confronting him. He speculates that Mayoran might have recognized who was disrupting his mana earlier, as he seems intelligent enough to avoid fighting against him. Amidst the chaos, the other mercenaries somehow climb out of the bottomless pit. Eriksson confronts the protagonist angrily, questioning why he stood by and watched, stressing that he could have offered help. Lennox pretends to be unaware of Eriksson's accusations and implies he doesn't understand what Eriksson means. He then reveals that his priority is assisting the woman with the shotgun, indicating he doesn't feel obliged to help anyone else. Lennox asserts that he doesn't consider himself friends with the mercenaries, finding it strange that they suddenly expect teamwork. However, his statement infuriates Eriksson, who impulsively lunges to attack the protagonist physically. Lennox remains unfazed and unleashes the elemental magic he tested after seeing Grimes' shock magic, prompting Eriksson to tumble aside and spew up. The protagonist then employs bolt magic, rendering Eriksson unconscious and catching his comrades off guard. After a while, as Lennox walks aside, Miguel inquires why he hadn't revealed his skill earlier, suggesting they would have treated him differently had they known. Lennox sternly responds that he didn't come to the undeveloped districts seeking special treatment and praise. Meanwhile, Milla and Morin individually continue to overpower those creatures. Conversely, when Lennox reminds them of their earlier agreement to tally their kills, Claria requests him to wait. She remarks that she doesn't know about Miguel, but doesn't consent to that agreement and intends to explain further. However, before she can complete it, Milla, thoroughly drenched with the creature's blood, intervenes. Milla sarcastically remarks that she understands that Claria intends that she needs money. However, she criticizes the notion of abandoning their teammates to prioritize personal gain. Claria attempts to deny Milla's accusation, asserting she wasn't thinking that way. In response, Milla sternly questions Claria's intentions and suggests that it would be more profitable for Claria to align herself with the mage rather than her friends. Feeling ashamed, Claria reluctantly admits that Milla's observation is correct. Milla mockingly pats Claria's shoulder. Meanwhile, Majoran arrives and acknowledges his defeat. He expresses that he cannot even be angry because Mage Van is mighty and commends that what happened today was very impressive. Majoran extends his business card to Lennox, mentioning that it's the only thing he has to offer, and asks if Lennox would accept it. Lennox understands that Majoran doesn't wish to continue arguing about the contaminated creatures and agrees to take his card. In response, Majoran expresses his gratitude to Lennox, hoping for the chance to meet him again. Later, as they calculate their kill count, Milla becomes frustrated, having taken down only 7 creatures while Lennox managed to eliminate 12. Lennox remarks that it would be higher if they counted the one where she accidentally blew its eyes off, so it's her own doing. Despite this, he still praises her efforts, acknowledging her work. In return, Milla compliments his magical abilities and extends her hand for a handshake. She suggests he visit her sometime, prompting Lennox to wonder why, to which she explains that Dylan always talks about him, so their boss is curious and must come by if he ever needs work with fat rewards. After Lennox mentions that he'll consider her suggestion, Milla walks away with a cheerful smile, reminding him that he promised, and confidently states that she'll see him next time. As she departs, Lennox contemplates that he got 19 million cell from the contaminated hunt. Although it's a bit short of his 20 million goal, he considers this enough to buy his much-needed Stimonia miracle drug and hopes it will be compelling. Upon returning home, Lennox meticulously reinforces the protective barriers encircling his apartment through a focused meditation session. Completing his preparations, he eyes the Stimonia encased within the crimson cover, a tangible reminder of the entire amount he invested in winning the bid. Contemplating its potential, he admits the possibility that the Stimonia might not yield the desired results, cautious of the potential adverse effects that excessive energy infusion might bring upon his body. Despite harboring reservations, he ponders the slim chance of mitigating his current penalties through its consumption. Cradling the Stimonia in his palm, he deliberates on balancing the medicine's benefits and possible drawbacks. Determined to explore its effects, he swallows the pill. However, soon, a surge of anxiety grips him, leaving him in a state of unease, and he anxiously wonders if his body is too weak when compared to the effects of the miracle medicine. He aimed to steer clear of forcibly infusing mana into his body, recognizing the impracticality and riskiness of that approach. Despite this awareness, he realized that dwelling on the consequences of a mana overdose was futile at that moment. The looming danger of losing consciousness or facing life-threatening rises in body temperature pushed him to make a crucial decision: to fortify his body by gradually introducing mana and building up his tolerance to prevent such dire outcomes. Amidst heavy sweating and discomfort, he determined to continue drinking the fluid until his fever subsided, primarily to stay alert. The following morning, upon awakening, he realized he had unexpectedly stayed awake through the night. Yet he did not experience any discernible improvements due to the medicine. Observing stains resembling toxins on his blanket with an odor reminiscent of viper venom, he speculated whether these marks were remnants of toxic materials discharged by the viper, mingled with other harmful substances expelled from his body. He considers it was worth the money, plus despite reinforcing his body with mana throughout the night, he is not sore or anything. Initially, he would have felt like he was being painfully stabbed by needles as soon as he stopped reinforcing his body with mana. Since he had no symptoms, the mana overdose must have eased up a bit. Although it doesn't seem like any other effects, just being able to offset the penalty's effects temporarily is enough for now. At least he checked that there is a way to mitigate the penalties. For a week after that, he could experience the miraculous effects of the medicine, as he could sleep without taking any sleeping pills, so he felt like he was getting some proper rest. Now that he has sufficiently rested, he intends to pursue another job request since he spent all his money on the miracle medicine. He tries to contact Jenny but becomes bewildered when the system notifies him that this number is currently unreachable, so he plans to see her then. Later, he takes on Van's persona and heads towards the bar to meet her. On his way, he notices the city is oddly quiet. He realizes something's off as the internet hasn't worked and wonders if something serious is happening. As he enters, he asks bartender Jordan about Jenny as she isn't in the bar. The bartender informs him that she was summoned and is probably at some random office. Lennox then asks if something is going on in Valkan right now. The bartender becomes startled at his lack of information, asking if he was sleeping for a week or something, as it's bizarre for him to ask this. Jordan explains that the envoy group that was supposed to arrive at the end of this month suddenly sent a visit notification last night, and thanks to that, Valkan's a mess right now. Lennox wonders if the city is so silent because of an early visit by some envoy team and responds that it can't be the only reason. The bartender concurs, stating that the envoy team is someone Van would never have imagined, and they have expressed their intent to participate. The protagonist contemplates for someone like Jordan to describe the person like that and wonders how great they are. The bartender informs him that the transcendental being, Heaven's Rebuke, who lived in seclusion for decades in the lighthouse of Fileman, is coming to Valkan. Later that night, Lennox roams around the Valkan city and pauses beside a towering building, deeming it a suitable location. He rarely employs floating magic due to its high mana consumption, but he decides to use it this time to propel himself upwards because he wants to see Heaven Rebuke. For 100 years, Heaven's Rebuke, Madria Falsier, has watched out for dangers in the open sea as the lighthouse keeper. She is a level 9 ascendant, of which less than 10 remain today. If a great mage is treated like a strategic arm, an ascendant is superior to a great mage. She is a transcendental being who truly challenges the limits, and because of the intense constraint they put on themselves to surpass the limit of what's possible, it's hard to come by them. It's impossible to describe in words how powerful they are. Heaven's Rebuke possesses the extraordinary ability to cast her gaze across thousands of kilometers, peering effortlessly into both the future and the past. Her life's dedication to observing the unfolding disasters across the vast expanse of time has elevated her to an unparalleled level of uniqueness and reverence among her peers. Lennox lands on the rooftop of that building, considering, if not now, he doesn't think he will ever have another chance to see her. Suddenly, his attention is diverted to soldiers, including a sniper and a signalman, who seem to be part of the specialized forces affiliated with the city government. He questions their presence in such a remote location, where the city square is barely visible, realizing that it underscores the significance of Heaven's Rebuke as a highly esteemed guest. He realizes that he can't knock them out or show himself, and he can't use invisibility magic on himself because of the penalties of mana addiction. Nonetheless, he unleashes nosy magic to erase his presence and employs illusion magic to distract the soldiers from their surroundings, rendering them unable to notice him. Lennox proceeds without hindrance, moving forward to perch on a parapet wall. With the aid of the scope provided by Jordan, he gazes downward to catch sight of Heaven's Rebuke. He observes a substantial crowd gathered to welcome Heaven's rebuke, noticing the extensive involvement of government agents and the military, emphasizing the immense importance of an ascendant. While perched on the rooftop, Lennox overhears the signalman communicating with his fellow soldiers via a walkie-talkie, informing them that Heaven's rebuke will arrive within the next 30 seconds, urging them to remain vigilant. As Madria Falsier arrives at the event surrounded by tight security, the crowd erupts into cheers, some even shedding tears of joy at the sight of the ascendant. At that moment, the protagonist notices her and senses something unusual. He becomes bewildered as the vicinity magic of Heaven's rebuke detects his presence. Lennox realizes her mana is immensely powerful, capable of potentially obliterating an entire city. However, he struggles to maintain his composure, wondering if she noticed him observing her. He abruptly rushes, realizing that he needs to get away for now, wondering how there can be consequences without a cause. He can feel like she has answered that in a world where order is destroyed yet balanced, they have been trying to answer that question for a long time, and his existence is the answer. Unbeknownst to others, she finds it exciting and remarks that if the others could see what she is seeing right now, they would have tried to hire him no matter what. However, she acknowledges that now that all the struggle is pointless, he must beware of Alcade. Meanwhile, Lennox tumbles on the ground, unable to fathom all that has happened. Madria Falsier's appearance changed many things, and Lennox obtained a new goal. It was to reach the peak of ascensions, through that he could find out why he woke up in this world. That's what he should do, as he was immensely confident about that. The protagonist finds on his phone that, society-wise, the meeting with Filenum ended very quickly, and the city government accepted all of the conditions the Filenum envoy group put out. This was decided as soon as the Ascendant decided to help Filenum, and 4 days later, he discovered that Madria Falsier, Heaven's rebuke, failed to ascend and died. He contemplates that she sees into the future and the past, so he wonders why she returned to Balkan in her last moments. Later, seeking insight, he discusses this with Jenny, who suggests that Madria Falsier's alignment with Filenum might hold the key to her return. According to her, the top-secret project, Black Consumer, was carried out in the undeveloped district. Evidence surfaced revealing that this project involved utilizing captives from Filenum as subjects for experimentation or testing purposes. The bartender, Jordan, intervenes, stating that the problem started because the person leading the agreement is now gone. The protagonist wonders if Jordan is saying that the Balkans will return to their word. Jordan responds, indicating that it might not happen immediately. However, the city government is unlikely to uphold this unfair agreement for an extended period. He anticipates that they could become increasingly desperate, and Jenny adds that this could escalate into a war. Lennox informs them that he doesn't think he will take any jobs today and decides to leave. As he walks around the street, he assumes that the Great Descendant created a momentary peace by sacrificing her own life. He wonders if she did this knowing this would turn out this way, or if she came to Balkan because she knew about his existence to check for herself that he, a consequence without a cause, existed. However, he concludes there is no point in thinking about it as his head hurts. While reaching for his viper in his blazer, Dykesley's cutter, which he previously took from some hooligans, accidentally falls onto the road. As he bends to retrieve it, an older man steps on it and refers to Lennox as a skinny bastard. The man endeavors to claim ownership of the gadget and angrily questions Lennox's right to pick up his belongings that carelessly fell to the ground. He raises his voice, demanding to know if Lennox heard him. However, Lennox finds the man's words a flimsy excuse and considers the situation somewhat ridiculous, pondering whether the man believes this tactic will be successful. He then gathers his magic and sternly walks forward, catching the man off guard, who abruptly kneels to apologize and begs not to kill him. After retrieving his belongings, Lennox questions the man's claim that the item belongs to him. The man agrees, stating that he crafted it in his shop. Therefore, it's his possession, and he inquires if that means something different to Lennox. He adds that it would have become his thing if he had adjusted it. The protagonist gazes at the gadget, reflecting how the hooligan requested him not to point this at them. and the person he rescued had mentioned it was a Dykes laser cutting machine that had been illegally modified into a weapon. Lennox then points out that if the man sells these things for money, they become the private property of the person who bought them, so he questions why the man is claiming ownership. With a deep sigh, the man remarks that he can't talk to fools who don't understand literalism. Then he adds that since Lennox has it now, he is his client and requests that he visit his shore if he needs anything. When he turns around to depart and again apologizes to the protagonist for what happened, Lennox realizes the man has left without providing any details. He acknowledges that he doesn't know the man's name or the name of his store. After 2 days, he heard that a request had reached Jenny through the dark web, so he visited their office seeking further details. As Lennox has a seat, he notices a green-haired client who looks very stark and asks the client if he has ever seen a magician. In unsophisticated behavior, the guy remarks that it's the first time he has seen a worthy among those who worked alone. He sarcastically adds that encountering someone who is not an idiot and has a decent character isn't unusual. Lennox then asks the client if he has prior knowledge about him, and he sternly urges why that guy acts like this with people he sees for the first time. Arch-Mage strangles the guy, and he menacingly brandishes the Dykes cutter at him, stating that if the client wants him to take the job, he must learn tact in speaking. Lennox warns him not to get on his nerves and test his patience, and his stern demeanor catches the guy off guard. The guy understands that he is the type who wants to know if the opponent or person in front of him is weaker or stronger than him. Once this is known,